present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. O Lord, we ask that this day you would make your presence known to us and help us as we honor the life and memory of Patsy Howard. Amen. Zach is now going to recite for us Psalm 23.
Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the path of righteousness, for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Amen. And now some of our team from the church I pastor, Freedom Fellowship, will lead us in Be Still My Soul.
Wants to move.
Yeah.
Okay. You tell me when to stop.
Just
Okay. Be still, my soul, the Lord is on your side. Bear patiently the cross of grief or pain. Leave to your God to order and provide. In every change, be faithful will remain. Be still, my soul, your best, your heavenly friend. Through thorny ways leads to a joyful end. Be still, my soul, your God will undertake to guide the future as he has the past. Your hope, your confidence, let nothing shake. All now mysterious shall be bright at last. Be still, my soul, the waves and winds still know his voice who ruled them while he dwelt below. Be still, my soul, when dearest friends depart, and all is dark, and in the vale of tears, then shall you better know his love is heart, who comes to soothe your
now we will hear from Lee Andrews. Ms. Andrews, you would come. And after Mr. Andrews speaks, invite any of you who would like a word of testimony about your relationship or your life with Patsy. Please be prepared to come forward after Mr. Andrews. This is Lee Andrews.
Wow, that 23rd Psalm was really powerful. That was Patsy. Wow, I didn't know it was going to be this hard. Mm. Wow. There's not a part of my life that I can remember not knowing Patsy. Her name has been used around me since I was 4 years old. Patsy was one of the nicest people you could ever meet. People just instantly liked her. Patsy and my dad have spoken about an event for years. Shortly after my dad had employed Patsy at our agency opened an office in Beaver Dam, Virginia, in what they called back in the 60s the old Tri-County Bank Building. So who knows if that place is even still standing. When my dad arrived at the Beaver Dam office, Patsy's office was so filled with flowers that her happiness frequently turned to tears. The outpouring of Beaver Dam resident well-wishers just overflowed. My father was emotionally touched by this outpouring of community love, and they've always talked about that, even to this day, after all this time. Spending time with Patsy was peaceful. Life's issues never seemed to bother her, and she never seemed to worry about much, except when it came to the well-being of friends and family, people that she cared about. Some of the usual things that would need attention in her house, she would leave the door unlocked for someone or a repairman to come in and fix. She asked that basically just close everything up when you leave, and never concerned about someone in her house unsupervised. She would just be glad to know that it was getting fixed. Sometimes in the mornings, the grandkids would call just to see how she was. How many people in here, the grandkids call them every day and see how you are? She was loved not just by family, but friends. Everyone she worked with, past and present, and agency customers. Many even became her friends and invited her places. She treated everyone in a way that she would want to be treated, and she thought that was very important. Anytime she was out of the office, we received many calls from people. Most I knew, some I didn't, asking how Patsy is everything okay? Whether she was out sick or even on vacation with family. People just wanted to know what's going on with Patsy. One day, CD, her son, called the office, said something had happened to one of the children, and he wanted to tell her about it on the phone right now, before she read it on Facebook. She greeted me every morning with her cheerful good morning, or the insiders know how you perkin. Those are just things she said. She always seemed to be in a good mood, no matter what. I valued her understanding of godly principles. I enjoyed those types of conversations with her. Sometimes I would ask her to ask her son, CD, what his understanding was on certain biblical topics. And she would give me a printout later of what he'd written. She told me one day she would like to be able to get to work earlier. I said, our office opens at 8:30. You know, that, to me, I think that's early. And she said, well, I'd like to get there around 7:30, she said. She said, I get up early, and it feels like I have to wait too long to get to the office at 8:30. And everybody's like, because they know Patsy's an early riser. I told her I didn't have a problem with that. I said, you have a key, you can do what you want. So a week later, I asked her, I said, so Patsy, you've been getting to work at 7:30 in the morning. How do you like that? And she said, oh, I love it, it's great. She said, I get a lot of things done in the peace and quiet, and she continued that for years. She liked to start her day early when most people were just waking up. She loved that McDonald's opened early so she could stop by for her coffee and biscuit on the way to the office in the morning. And they all knew her. You know, amazing. She lived a very simple, uncomplicated lifestyle and loved the idea of things that could simplify her life even more, like Facebook to keep up with friends and family, ordering things online instead of going to a store and going shopping, and paying her bills online. I don't even pay my bills online. She's 79 and paid her bills online. Years ago, she had gone to some event, I don't know if it was a church event or what have you, and eaten some barbecued chicken. She asked the person how she fixed it. And he told her, oh, it's easy. I did it in my crock pot. Well, Patsy didn't have a crock pot at the time, and she said, wow, that's just great. She fixed stuff in a crock pot. That's the thing, you just put stuff in, set it and forget it, and come back later and it's all done. So, not long after that, she told a few of us at work that she had purchased this crock pot and was making barbecue chicken for dinner. Sounds good, right? Well, the next day I asked her, I said, Patsy, how was the barbecue chicken? And she told me, well, it didn't quite turn out like the one she'd had the first time. Well, I didn't want to ad-lib on that, so Patsy had gone to lunch. So later I had asked Linda Pitts, who actually sat behind Patsy, what she thought happened with the barbecue chicken. And she said, well, I'm glad Patsy's not here, but she said, Patsy didn't know the crock pot had two settings, a high and a low. So she turned the crock pot on high and came back 9 hours later. There wasn't much left but burnt stuff and bones. And Linda and I got a good laugh out of that. Well, she continued to make things in the crock pot and eventually became pretty proficient with it, didn't she? Yeah. We loved her accent and how she would pronounce things. People even loved how she answered the phone. Yeah. I mean, she just had this way of answering the phone. People say, I could just call and listen to her answer the phone and hang up. She used to talk about doing things the old way. One day, I asked her, I said, Patsy, you do all the stuff. You ever do any canning of things? She said, yes. I said, really? So, what, do you like water bath canning? Do you like pressure canning? What do you do? She said, neither. And I thought, well, She said, I go to the store and buy a can of this and a can of that. She said, this is modern times. The grocery stores have everything now. No need to spend all that time in the kitchen. And I said, okay, touche, you got me. But one thing I'm glad she spent time in the kitchen for is the wonderful fudge she made that we all looked forward to at Christmas time. I told her if there was one thing to ever pass down to her family, it would have to be the fudge. And she told me, she said one of her grandchildren, John, was already getting pretty good at it. There were so many things that I got to experience with her. I'm glad I could. Her marriage to Greg Howard, how happy she was to be a part of his life and to have all those different life experiences. The house at the river, being part of all his civic organization involvement. She really loved all that. I just wish they'd had more time together. The wonderful trip out west with the family, she really loved that. I would call her from time to time. Patsy, did you have fun today? Oh, we saw so many things. We did so many things. She said, the family wants to go to a place called Death Valley. And I said, really? And I said, well, and she said, they want me to sit in the car with the air conditioning. I said, I can understand that, and make sure you have plenty of cool water, too. But she talked about that trip a lot. She just made you feel good being around her. And like many of you, I will miss her greatly.
Anyone else like to share a memory, a word, your memories of life with Patsy? Well, we will now hear from someone who has known her all his life, her son C.D.
I appreciate Lee sharing. If honest or be told, he's probably spent more time with my mama than I have, working every day in that office. And she'd always talk about Lee, and never called your dad anything but Mr. Andrews, but it was Lee for you. And it was a precious office environment. You don't get it today in today's corporate world. It's just a blessing for her to do that. Talk about helping unique customers. Whenever some of them in the office couldn't understand what a customer was saying, maybe they were foreign customers or something, she said they always sent them to me because she always had patience. She could always understand what they were saying. And then there was one famous customer, this will be an inside joke for Lee, named Harriet. You remember Harriet?
Oh, yes.
Harriet, okay. So you'll have to ask Lee about the customer Harriet. And she dealt with this customer because she said she was the only one who could keep a straight face while dealing with this person. And so that was years before people were like Harriet. But anyway, who was Patsy Elmira Tate Howard? Well, she was born a month and a half after the attack on Pearl Harbor, World War II. Her family, she said, always had plenty of food, but sometimes in other areas there were struggles. And so it was a family of modest means. At 3 years old, her world was shaken. One of the earliest memories she has as a child was seeing her daddy laying there in her living room in the casket. And this left her and her 10-year-old brother, Renzer, and her mother, Mary, without a man in the home. It was during this time that my uncle, Renzer, stepped up. He was the father figure in the home, and he provided for her and her mother. He was drafted by Providence to make sure that the Hilltop Farm over there on Tiemann Road continued operating. And he would be proud to say that he remains at that same location even to this day. Do you know, as was characteristic of my mother, instead of growing bitter, her mother turned to God during those hard times. Mama remembers sitting around with the family and singing out of the old Methodist hymnal. Maybe it was a Cokesbury hymnal. They were active members of the Beaver Dam Methodist Church, and her testimony was that there was a revival meeting, and she went forward in that revival meeting as a young person and made a profession of faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. One of her closest childhood friends was her cousin Betty Hall. They grew up together and did things that girls do. One of the things my mom remembers is going on picnics together in the back field behind the Hilltop Farm house. It was during her childhood that there was a major event that happened to her that she'd tell everybody about, and that was she got bit by a copperhead. She always called it a copperhead moccasin. I looked it up, and I guess copperheads are part of the moccasin family. That's what I guess they called them back then. With her thin body that she always had, they told her that the only way she'd put on any weight is if she drank some beer, and they were good temperance Methodists, and she didn't do that. But her thin body should have died after that poison entered her body. But she understood that God spared her during that time. She went on to graduate in 1959 from the Beaver Dam High School, member of the last graduating class. She was proud of that. Always enjoyed going to those reunions. When she graduated high school, she let everybody know she had 3 jobs when she graduated high school. And she couldn't really stand a lot of the modern stuff that goes around. And she said, if I had 3 jobs, at least, fill in the blank, could get 1. Working hard was a theme of her life. After high school, she would board a train at the Beaver Dam train station, or maybe even at a cross where the train crossed somewhere up there. And every Monday through Friday, she'd ride for an hour to downtown to the Main Street station, ride an hour back. She'd walk up the hill from the Main Street station and go to work at a place called Davenport down there before she took a position with the R.W. Andrews Insurance Agency. Things that she enjoyed, you see, she'd watch the news and she'd say, that's just not the Richmond I remember. I think about the Capitol, all boarded up. She used to eat her lunch there. She'd go eat her lunch on the Capitol Green while she worked downtown. A lot of people did back then. But in 1964, she made a decision that would change her life. She began working at the Raymond W. Andrews Insurance Agency. She served under the founder, Raymond Andrews. She'd tell stories about him. His son, William Andrews, told stories about him driving into Beaver Dam on that motorcycle. Said everybody thought he was Elvis Presley. And then under Raymond Andrews' grandson, Lee Andrews. In her mind, it was undoubtedly one of the best decisions she ever made. She thoroughly enjoyed working with the people there, called them her family, and they were. She worked at this agency over 56 years. You don't see that anymore. She embodied the spirit of Colossians 3:23 and 24, which says, whatsoever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men, knowing that of the Lord you shall receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. She had a higher boss, that she worked for, which made her a productive worker here on earth. One lady in particular, her husband was here last night, named Linda Pitts. Worked with her for over 40 years, Bernard said. Over 40 years. You know, her office kind of resembled that old country song, 9 to 5 at times. If not the office, then the whole, that era of office work. And her and Linda had not just a friendship. They didn't just survive, but they thrived in the office. There were many others who encouraged my mom in that agency. I think of Ava, who's still living. I think of Gladys, Sylvia, some of these names that I remember growing up with. Mr. Perkins, Mr. Howard, it was never by the first name. You were a girl in the office, you called them by their last name. What an era that she lived in. During this time, while working at the Raymond Andrews Agency's Beaver Dam office, she met my dad. In 1968, they married. If you go in the house where she lived, she helped design that house. And there were a lot of things that she put in it that were kind of forward-thinking for her day. 1.5 baths. Not everybody had more than one bathroom. Open rooms, her living room, dining room, her den, her kitchen were open rooms. Plenty of closet space in that house as well. She was proud of her brick rancher, and she meticulously kept it up until she passed. 1974, another important year, I was born. As with her childhood snake bite, my birth almost killed her. She remembers St. Mary's Hospital, which was Catholic. She had to sign a paper which says if it comes down to the mother or the baby, we save the baby. Her mama didn't want her to sign it. I don't blame her. She signed it. She always said, I came home, but Granny, she stayed behind. Had to get a blood transfusion. But again, God spared her life. She came home. What was life like with Mama? Well, I'll sum it up in a phrase she used to use. Maybe this will help explain to Heather and the kids why I am the way I am. She always said, zoom, zoom, zoom. And she wasn't talking about zooming like they have today, but she'd get in her car, whether it was that Ford Granada or that Mercury Monarch, or the first new car she bought was a Toyota Corolla. And she'd get around and she'd zoom, zoom, zoom. We'd be running around all the time. Always busy, always on the go. She made sure we were in church. She paid for me to go to a Christian school through the 8th grade. She never hindered my desire to know God. She encouraged me wholeheartedly to pursue a relationship with the God of the Bible. And that was her greatest gift to me. Instead of complaining about life or wishing that things were different, she believed 1 Timothy 6 through 8. Godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it's certain we can carry nothing out. Having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. Simple. That was a word that was used to describe her. She was, I guess you could say, not in a bad sense, proud of her simplicity. She didn't want to complicate life. You know, she was just a simple person. If you ever sit down with her at a meal, she just enjoyed every bite. That's the type of person she was. She just would go to the river and just sit there on the porch or in the gazebo and just enjoyed. Sit there every night with her cat in her lap watching Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. You know, it's just simple. There's nothing complicated about her at all. But in simplicity, there's great wisdom. And maybe someone can learn from her example. She understood the truth of 1 Timothy 6, 9, and 10. But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Mama was frugal by choice, and she managed her finances well. She learned from her mama, Granny, who would say, it's not how much you make, it's what you do with what you make. That's all you need to know in finances. She looked around and she saw people who were much wealthier than she was, who were largely, due to their wealth, much worse off than she was. She had peace with God and peace within, and she understood that this was far more valuable than money. I one time asked her, I said, well, you know a lot about insurance. Why don't you start your own agency? She said, I wouldn't want the headache of running a business. I just like to go in, know what my duties are, get paid, not take it home with me. And she always had an admiration for those who had to take it home with them. She encouraged me to get involved in as many things as possible, laying the groundwork for me to do what nobody else in our family had done, that is to graduate from college. We had an Uncle Frank who went to college,